Hey there. Now, I know for some of us it doesn't really feel like this summer has ever got going, but it is almost the end of meteorological summer and the start of autumn. But what can we expect? Well, starting off looking at our pressure trend. If you're a regular viewer of these 10-day trends, you'll have no doubt seen a chart like this before. It shows the most likely pressure pattern as we go through the next 2 weeks. And you may know that reds indicate that higher pressure is more likely, and higher pressure generally means settled, dry conditions. And this is what we have looking further ahead. Yes, notice around this coming weekend, less of a signal, so some changeable, unsettled weather quite likely. But generally the trend as we go through into the start of autumn is for high pressure to be most dominant. Doesn't mean it's going to be totally dry. There is some devil in the detail, which I'll come on to shortly. But starting off looking at the picture we have at the moment, we did have some hot weather across parts of the southeast on Wednesday, but with these various fronts coming in from the west, they're going to clear the hot air away. And so something turning a bit fresher as we go overnight into Thursday, and with some clear skies around, could be a bit of a fresh start for some of us on Thursday morning. Through Thursday itself, quite a few showers, particularly across parts of Scotland, but also Northern Ireland, and some showers for parts of northern western England and Wales, but towards the south-southeast, staying largely dry, decent amount of sunshine, still warm, although temperatures down a few degrees compared to Wednesday. Later on Thursday, we do have some more showers for a time, but a lot of the showers clearing away and easing, and we will have a lot of dry, clear weather as we go into Friday. Could be a bit of a fresh start again, and do watch out for some mist and fog patches, particularly towards some western parts first thing on Friday morning. Then through Friday itself, it is going to be a largely fine day. High pressure building and dominating the story. Watch out for some showers, could be quite frequent across parts of the northeast, and some blustery winds possible here. Also 1 or 2 isolated showers around in other places. But on the whole, Friday, with that high pressure, it is going to be largely dry. And we stick with that largely dry theme as we go into the weekend, but some showery rain starting to push its way in across southern parts as we go through Saturday. And worth bearing in mind, whilst there is some uncertainty about this, some of the showers could be heavy, possibly even thundery, as they make their way a little bit further northwards as we go through Saturday itself. But away from the south, actually, for many, it is going to be a pretty fine day on Saturday. Lots of dry and sunny weather around, and in the sunshine, feeling pretty warm. Now, there is a front waiting out in the west as we go through this weekend, and that is causing us some headaches. It's not likely to bring a huge amount of rain, but it will have an influence on our weather nonetheless. Now, there is some uncertainty as to what it's going to do and how quickly it's going to come across. And we can see that if we look at ECMWF data. So here's the front as we go through Saturday, gradually making its way eastwards towards the UK as we go through this coming weekend. But if we go towards the end of Sunday and into Monday, you can see there's a fair amount of spread as to exactly how far that front is going to progress across the UK. Now, I mentioned that it's not necessarily going to bring a huge amount of rain. It will bring perhaps some wet weather towards northern and western parts as we go through Sunday into Monday. But perhaps the more pressing point about it will be the fact that depending how quickly it comes through, how much energy it has, how much oomph it has behind it, means how many showers we're going to see developing across other parts of the country, particularly as we go through Sunday into Monday. So yes, on Saturday we could see some thunderstorms perhaps in the south, but on Sunday, if this front takes a little bit longer to come through, we could see some more showers, fairly widespread showers, and these could continue into Monday, and they could be heavy and thundery. But if instead the front comes through a little bit quicker, then it will stop those from developing. If we look at that in a different way, and starting off looking at our rainfall accumulations as we go through Saturday the 31st of August initially, and if we look at our high-res data from the Met Office, and you can see it's highlighting there could be some hefty showers developing, and they may cause some localised impacts, but on the whole shouldn't be too problematic. Worth bearing in mind, GFS, the American model, doesn't really have many showers. Its resolution isn't as high across the UK, so that somewhat makes sense. Meanwhile, ECMWF is highlighting some showers but doesn't have quite the same intensity, and our global model, again, the resolution isn't as high, so it doesn't capture the showery nature that we're expecting across the south on Saturday. But you can see across many parts, central northern areas, many models in agreement, it is looking largely dry. As we go through into Sunday, though, slightly different story. Here we get a bit more disagreement in what we could see happening. Notice ECMWF has that front coming through, and whilst it does still have some showers developing across the UK, they don't look particularly intense because that front's going to start to make its way in. However, if we look at the high-res data from the Met Office, then there's perhaps a greater chance of seeing some more intense showers developing as we go through Sunday, because it keeps that front a little bit further west, less likely to make its way in. If we then look ahead to Monday, and it goes in a similar pattern in as much as, yes, the front with the Met Office data has started to come in from the west, but it hasn't made much progress. And so by Monday, we could have some heavy thundery downpours developing across many parts of the UK, particularly towards central, eastern, southeastern parts. But again, if we compare that to ECMWF data, and that goes with the idea that the front will have made greater progress across the UK, so the wettest weather instead will be towards the northwest of the UK. Meanwhile, across the bulk of England and Wales, really, yes, a few outbreaks of rain, perhaps a couple of showers, but not on the same scale as what the Met Office model, either the global or high-res model, are highlighting instead. So just worth bearing in mind, there's some uncertainty about what can come this weekend. We may have some fairly widespread showers as we go through Sunday and into Monday, developing across parts of England and Wales, or instead the front will come in a bit quicker, and that will bring more wet weather to northern and western areas, and in fact it'll be a little bit drier across more central parts. So a bit of uncertainty as to what we're going to get in terms of rainfall amount, but what can we expect temperature-wise? So I already said it is turning a bit fresher than we have at the moment as we go through into Thursday. But in fact, if we look at our temperature anomaly charts as we go through this weekend, and but worth bearing in mind, even the end of August, start of September, if you get any sunshine, it is going to feel pretty warm, and there will be some relatively warmth across, relative warm conditions across some parts of Western UK as we go through Saturday, but just near normal for the time of year. By Sunday and even into Monday, there's actually likely to be quite a bit of cloud around, but even despite the cloud, we could have some relatively high temperatures. For some, temperatures in the south will be several degrees above average. Worth bearing in mind, these are comparing seasonal average, so this would be for the start of September, whereas this is for the end of August. Similarly, worth bearing in mind as we go through the end of this week, we do have some chilly nights to come with that high pressure building as we go into Friday. Calm conditions, clear skies, perfect ingredients for temperatures to drop a little bit lower, but I think that's going to become less of a thing as we go into the beginning of autumn. But what happens thereafter? And although there's a fair amount of uncertainty as to the detail as to what we can expect through this coming weekend and the start of next week, after that things get a little bit more confident to some extent. Here is the most likely regime for next Tuesday from ECMWF. Now this has a slightly greater than 50% chance at the moment, and it goes with high pressure out towards the west, generally dominating our weather. Because of the position, it would still allow for some showery rain to affect some southeastern parts perhaps, but generally we have our fine weather coming in from the west. Now remember, winds go around high pressure in a clockwise direction, and so it's not a particularly warm direction that we'd be getting our winds from, but nonetheless generally a more settled theme for much of the UK. Worth bearing in mind the second most likely, which has around a 33% chance, it says 35, but I think it was 33% chance of likelihood for the same day, is very, very similar. So pretty likely that this is going to happen. The only thing we do have to bear in mind is the next most likely, which only has around a 10% likelihood, but instead this high pressure hasn't pushed quite far enough eastwards, and instead we have a lot of unsettled weather, a relatively deep area of low pressure, unseasonable weather, really lots of rain to start for early September, and so it's not expected, but it's definitely not out of the question that we could have a very wet day instead on Tuesday. I think it's much more likely that this high is dominant, and so it is going to be a largely fine picture. Now if we jump ahead a few more days and go to Thursday, and now looking at the most likely, and generally the agreement really by the middle to end of next week is for this high pressure to have edged a little bit further eastward still, and so likely to be more dominating our weather, and so likely that it will be mostly dry. Not totally dry. This could still allow for some showers to come in depending on the position of it. We could get some showers around eastern coastal parts, and if that high is just a little bit further north, we may drag in a bit of an easterly across some southern parts of the UK, and so that could allow for some showers to come in across parts of the south in particular at times. But on the whole, most likely, I think, higher pressure, and with that then a generally dry weather as we go through much of next week. Let's look at our temperatures quickly, and here are meteograms from ECMWF for our capital cities, and they all show generally the same thing. And as much as we do have some relatively warm weather at the moment, then temperatures drop down as we go through Thursday, then they're around average before picking up again early next week. Let's take London for example, and you can see, like I showed you before, the maximum temperatures picking up as we go through to Sunday. So even though Sunday could be quite cloudy, there could be quite a few showers around, it's actually looking pretty warm. And then temperatures, they do generally stay on the above average side, but there is a relatively large spread as we go through next week. And if you look beyond, really around average looks most likely, but there is the potential that it could be higher than or colder than average. So no guarantee on that front. And it's a relatively similar story if we look at the other capital cities as well. A general trend of something perhaps a bit warmer as we go through the end of the weekend. If we take Cardiff, for example, you can see that little jump as well. And then closer to average, maybe a slight bias to slightly warmer than average perhaps, but there is still a fair amount of spread. With the position of the high pressure that may become more dominant, or is likely to become more dominant, I think it's fair to say it could keep with our winds coming in from the north-northwest, which isn't a particularly warm direction at all. And so it's not surprising that we're unlikely to see any major real warmth or real heat, but with some decent fine weather around, I think many people after the summer we've had won't be overly complaining. Now, we will of course be keeping you fully up to date as we go through the next 10 days, so make sure you never miss an update by subscribing to our YouTube channel. Bye-bye.